The knife slid in again. Cold steel, hot blood. The man's breath reeked of rage as he snarled, "Move, or you'll die too." But she did not move. Her body was already collapsing from 6 wounds, yet she pressed herself tighter against the injured soldier on the ground, shielding his torn uniform with her own. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the chaos with a clarity that froze time itself. "You'll have to go through me." 7 thrusts, flesh tearing, pain searing. Yet, she never let the soldier's hand go slack in hers. She refused to give way. She refused to let death have him. And when her eyes fluttered shut on that blood-soaked pavement, no one watching could have imagined what would happen the next morning when Marines in dress blues appeared at her doorstep. Her name was Claire Donnelly, a nurse, a veteran, and to most who passed her on the street, just another face in the crowd. They saw a tired woman with lined eyes, always wearing long sleeves even in the summer heat. They did not see the quiet scars etched deep across her arms, reminders of deployments, of nights filled with mortar fire, of soldiers she could not save. She carried those ghosts silently, each memory folded inside her, like letters never mailed. And though her gait was steady, it was not without a limp, the shadow of an IED that had torn through her convoy years before. She had served, she had bled, and she had come home only to find that the war did not always end where the battlefield did. On that night, outside a crowded bus terminal, she saw him, a young soldier barely more than a boy, uniform wrinkled, one arm in a sling, limping alone through the jeers of 2 men looking for trouble. They circled him, mocking his medals, pulling at his rucksack. And when one shoved him down, Claire stepped forward, placing her body between them with the same instinct that had carried her through battlefields overseas. The blade came quick, and the silence of bystanders came quicker. No one intervened. Phones lifted, but no one moved. The crowd chose distance over courage, comfort over conscience. She stood alone. Claire's life had always been defined by standing alone. Born in a town where factory smoke drowned out the stars, she'd grown up knowing the sharp bite of poverty, the taste of canned beans stretched over a week. She enlisted at 19 not out of patriotism alone, but because she wanted to prove she could be more than the girl who scrubbed diner counters. War had hardened her, but it had also softened her. She had held too many trembling hands, wiped too many tears from young faces far from home. She had watched a comrade named Jacobs bleed out in her lap, whispering for his mother with his final breath. That night, Claire had sworn to herself, "Never again. Not while I still breathe." That vow echoed in her as she faced the man with the knife. The morning after the attack, Claire awoke in a haze of white sheets and antiseptic. 7 stab wounds stitched closed. Machines hummed softly beside her bed. The soldier she had shielded was alive, recovering down the hall. But when the nurse drew back the curtain, Claire froze. Standing there, in perfect silence, were 3 Marines in full dress blues. Their shoes shone like mirrors, their posture unyielding, their faces solemn. They did not come with cameras. They did not come with applause. They came because honor demands witnesses. The hospital ward fell quiet. Conversations hushed. Even the machines seemed to pulse softer as the Marines stepped forward. No words were needed. They stood at her bedside, saluted as one, and held it until her tears blurred the room. In that silence, Claire realized something. Dignity does not roar. It does not beg to be seen. It stands, unshakable, until the world has no choice but to notice. News spread quickly, though not because she sought it. A bystander's grainy video had captured the moment, the blade rising, her body shielding, the collapse. Strangers shared it, arguing over what kind of woman steps forward when everyone else steps back. But the Marines knew. The next day, they returned, not 3 this time, but dozens. Veterans, nurses, fellow service members. They gathered outside her small home, lining the street in silent formation. No speeches, no chants, just presence. The very men who had mocked, who had stabbed, were now faceless, forgotten. What remained was a line of uniforms stretching down the block, a living wall of respect that no one could ignore. Claire opened her door, still fragile, her arm bound in bandages. For a moment, she thought she might collapse again, but not from pain this time, from the weight of seeing what she had always believed yet rarely witnessed. That sacrifice, even in silence, calls forth honor. One of the Marines stepped forward and pressed a folded flag into her hands. His voice was steady, but it carried the weight of 1,000 untold stories. "You shielded one of our own. For that, we stand for you." She trembled as she whispered the only words she could find. "I didn't do it to be seen. I did it because no one else would." And he replied with a truth that would echo far beyond that street. Courage is never about being seen. It's about being there when no one else silent. The crowd did not cheer. They did not clap. They simply bowed their heads, letting the silence speak louder than any applause. A neighbor wept quietly on her porch. Children, once restless, stood still. Even passing cars slowed as drivers glimpsed the sea of uniforms and understood, instinctively, that they were witnessing something sacred. For once, the world did not turn away. In the days that followed, Claire recovered slowly. The scars would never fade, but she wore them as medals etched into her skin. The soldier she had shielded visited her often, always carrying the guilt of survival. She met it with a quiet strength. "Live well," she told him. "That's how you repay the fallen. That's how you repay me." Her words lingered, destined to become the kind of quote that circulates long after names are forgotten. Live well. That's the only repayment courage ever asks for. And though Claire never sought recognition, her story began to ripple outward. It was retold in classrooms, in veteran halls, in whispered conversations among those who had once chosen silence, but now wondered if they, too, might have stepped forward had they been there. She had no illusions about her role. She was not invincible. She was not flawless. She was simply a woman who chose action over comfort, sacrifice over safety. And in that choice, she reminded the world of something it desperately needed to remember. That sometimes, the bravest voices are the ones that never shout. In the end, Claire's story was not about knives or scars, or even Marines at her doorstep. It was about the power of presence, about what happens when courage meets silence and transforms it. So, to everyone watching, ask yourself, where were you when courage was required? Would you have stood still, or would you have stepped forward? Because courage does not wait for the perfect moment. It demands the imperfect one. Comment where you're watching from. Share your thoughts on Claire's story, and subscribe for more stories that honor those silent heroes who remind us all. The world may forget the noise, but it never forgets the silence of sacrifice.